The night was silent, but it was not the silence of peace, it was the silence of death. The great city once shined with tall towers and bright lights, but now only ruins stood. Broken walls, black smoke, and endless shadows covered the land. In the middle of the ruins, a small figure hid among the stones. She was an alien girl, young, weak, and lost. Her skin was pale, her clothes torn, and her eyes filled with fear. She had once lived in a proud empire with family and friends, but war had taken everything. Her people were defeated, her home destroyed, and she was left alone. Her stomach growled with hunger, but there was no food. She searched through broken metal and burned ground, finding nothing. Every sound of wind or falling stone made her body shake. She feared soldiers, drones, and scavengers. Everyone was an enemy. Everyone wanted to kill. Her people had told her about humans. They said humans were cruel. They said humans were greedy. They said humans destroyed planets and laughed at the pain of others. She was told never to trust. Them she believed it, because why wouldn't she? The galaxy feared humans, but tonight something strange happened. From the shadows of the ruined street, footsteps came closer. She held her breath and pressed against the cold stone. Her heart raced fast. Thump, thump, thump. The steps were heavy, slow, and careful. Not the sound of a wild animal, not the sound of a drone. This was someone walking with purpose. She peeked through the crack of the wall. At first, she saw only the glow of a small light. Then she saw him, a human. His face was dirty, his armor scratched, but his eyes were sharp and alive. He moved with calm control, holding a weapon in one hand, a bag in the other. Fear wrapped around her heart like chains, she thought. If he sees me, I am dead. She pressed back, but a loose stone fell near her, feet with a small noise. The human froze. His head turned, his light swept across the rubble, and then it landed on her hiding place. Her chest tightened. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She wanted to scream, but her voice was gone. She felt like prey caught by a hunter. The human raised his weapon, pointing it toward the shadow where she hid. She closed her eyes, waiting for the shot, waiting for the end. But nothing happened. Instead, she heard something fall on the ground near her. Slowly, she opened her eyes. There on the dust lay a small, packaged food. Her mind spun with confusion. Why? Why would he drop food? Why not fire? The human's weapon lowered. He said nothing. He just placed the food near her and stepped back. His face showed no hate, no anger, only a strange calm. The girl did not move. She watched him, waiting for a trick, waiting for him to attack. When she reached out, but he did not. Instead, he sat on a piece of broken wall, taking out his own rations. He began to eat slowly, showing her the food was safe. Her hunger screamed louder than her fear. With shaking hands, she reached out, pulled the package close, and opened it. Inside were simple things: bread, dried meat, and clean water. The smell made her eyes water. She ate fast, tears running down her dirty cheeks. The human said nothing. He just watched, his eyes sharp but not cruel. After a while, he stood up, lifted his bag, and turned away. He walked back into the night, leaving her with food. The girl sat frozen, chewing slowly now. Her mind could not understand. All her life she was told humans bring only death, yet this one had given her life. He could have killed her, but he chose not to. The ruins around her were still cold, still broken, but inside her chest something small and warm began to grow. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the first spark of doubt, a question she never thought she would ask. What if the stories were wrong? The wind howled through the ruins, carrying smoke and ash. But for the first time since she lost everything, she felt she might not be truly alone. Somewhere in the darkness, a human had seen her and chosen kindness. She did not know why, she did not know his name, but she would remember this moment, because in the middle of all her pain, when she was left with nothing, a human's hand of mercy had reached her, and that changed something deep inside her heart. The morning came slow and heavy. Gray clouds covered the ruined sky. Ash fell like snow, and the streets were empty except for silence. The girl sat in her corner of broken stone, clutching the memory of last night. The food was gone, eaten quickly by her desperate hunger, but the taste still lingered on her tongue. It had been the first real food in weeks. Her weak body now had a spark of strength, but her mind was filled with questions. Why had the human helped her? Why had he left without saying a word? Why had he not killed her? She turned the questions again and again in her head, but no answer came. She told herself it must be a trick. Humans were dangerous. She had been told all her life. Yet deep inside her heart, she remembered his eyes, sharp but calm, watching her not like prey but like someone who mattered. The day passed slowly. She stayed hidden, afraid the human might return with soldiers. But as night fell, she heard those footsteps again. That steady sound, heavy but careful, echoing in the ruins. Her body tensed, her breath froze. She wanted to run, but her legs locked. Then she saw the light again, small and steady. The human walked into view, carrying his bag. His armor scratched, his face tired, but his steps strong. He stopped at the same place as before. He looked at her hiding corner. His hand reached into his bag, and he pulled out another small package. He set it down gently on the ground, then stepped back. This time the girl did not wait so long. Hunger still burned in her belly. She crawled forward, picked up the package, and opened it. Inside she found not only food, but also a small bottle of medicine. Her eyes widened, her hands shook, the cuts on her arms, the bruises on her legs. He had noticed he was giving her healing. The human knelt and showed her how to open the bottle. He spoke only a few words, slow and clear. His voice was low, calm, not cruel. She did not understand all of it, but she understood his action. He wanted her to heal. She drank the medicine. It was bitter, but it warmed her stomach. The pain in her body softened. Her eyes watered again. She could not understand why a human, her enemy, would do this. The human sat on the wall again, eating his own meal. He did not push her to talk. He did not come closer. He only stayed near, like a quiet shadow that offered safety. For the first time since the war, the girl felt something new. She felt seen. She felt noticed, not as an enemy, not as a burden, but as a living being who deserved to survive. The night grew colder. The human rose, slung his bag over his shoulder, and looked at her one last time. His eyes met hers. He spoke again, only a few words, but this time she understood the meaning. Stay hidden or follow me. Her heart thumped. The choice weighed heavy. If she stayed, she would starve again. If she followed, she might fall into danger. Was he leading her into a trap, or was he truly offering safety? She hugged her knees, staring at him. He did not force her. He waited only a few breaths, then turned and began to walk into the dark street. His light bobbed and faded as he moved away. She sat frozen, her chest tight, her mind full of storms. She had no reason to trust, but she also had no reason to live if she stayed here. The ruins held nothing. The war had taken everything. Her small hand clenched around the empty medicine bottle. Her eyes looked at the direction he had gone, and, for the first time, she stood. Her legs weak, but her will stronger. She stepped out from her hiding place. The wind howled around her, carrying dust and ash, but she walked, following the fading light ahead, her heart still full of fear, but also something else, a small, fragile hope. She saw him waiting at the corner of a ruined street. He did not smile. He did not move closer, but he lifted the light so she could see him clearly. His hand was not raised to strike, but to guide. Slowly, she walked toward him, each step heavy with doubt, each breath shaky. Yet she kept moving. When she reached him, he nodded once, then turned to lead the way. The girl followed, her shadow stretching long behind her. The ruins still whispered of danger. But now she was not alone. She was walking beside a human, the very creature she had been taught to fear. Her mind still screamed with warning, but her heart whispered another voice. This is the one who fed you. This is the one who healed you. She did not know where the road would lead. She did not know if she would live or die. But she knew one thing. The human had given her something no one else had given. A gift not of food or medicine alone, but a gift of choice. A gift of hope. And that was more powerful than any weapon. The road ahead was broken, full of cracked stone and twisted metal. The human walked with steady steps, holding the light in front of him. The girl followed close behind, her eyes wide, her heart racing. Every corner looked dangerous. Every shadow felt alive. The ruins were not safe. Drones sometimes passed overhead, scanning the ground with red beams. Wild scavenger creatures moved between the wrecks, searching for weak prey. The girl had survived alone by hiding. But now she was moving forward, guided by a human she still did not fully trust. Her body trembled, but her legs kept walking. She had chosen to follow, and there was no turning back. The human stopped often, raising his hand to signal silence. He listened to the wind, to the sounds of shifting rubble, his senses sharp, like a hunter. The girl copied his movements, trying to stay quiet, learning without words. Once, they heard the buzzing of a drone close above. The red light swept across the ground. The human quickly pulled her under the remains of a broken roof, pressing her down with a firm hand. The light passed, the drone moved on, but her heart still pounded. She looked at him, his face calm, his breathing steady. For him, danger was normal. For her, it was terror. But somehow his calmness began to steady her too. Later, when they crossed an old bridge, the stone cracked under her foot. She gasped and froze, afraid it would collapse. The human grabbed her arm and pulled her back before the stone fell into the darkness below. The crash echoed far, and she realized how close she had been to death. He let go of her arm, gave her a short nod, and kept moving. He did not scold her. He did not speak cruel words. He simply continued the path, as if saving her life was natural. As the night deepened, they entered a narrow street where the air smelled of smoke and rust. A group of scavenger creatures crawled from the shadows, their eyes glowing yellow, their bodies long and sharp with claws. The girl froze in fear. The creatures hissed and circled them, hungry for weak flesh. The human raised his weapon, aiming. With quick precision, his voice came low, steady. "Stay behind me." The girl obeyed, crouching low as the creatures attacked. The human fired, short bursts of light cutting through the dark. The scavengers shrieked, some falling, others scattering. One leapt from the side, claws reaching, but the human turned fast, striking it with the butt of his weapon. The girl covered her ears from the noise, but she watched, her fear mixed with awe. The human fought not like a monster, but like a shield, protecting her from death. When the creatures finally fled, silence returned. The smell of smoke and burned flesh filled the air. The girl looked at the human, expecting anger, but he only checked his weapon and looked at her with steady eyes. "Keep close," he said. His words simple, but his tone strong. She nodded, quickly, feeling something new. A strange sense of safety, even in the middle of fear. Hours passed. The journey through the ruins was slow. Each step was heavy with danger. But she noticed something. Every time her strength failed, the human slowed his pace. Every time she stumbled, he waited. He never left her behind. At last they reached an opening in the broken city. Ahead lay a wide crater where buildings once stood tall. In the center of the crater was a dark entrance, half covered with metal, plates, and stone. The human pointed to it, his voice low. "Shelter." The girl's eyes followed his hand. Her heart beat faster. Shelter meant safety, maybe food, maybe other survivors. But it also meant risk. What if enemies were inside? What if it was a trap? The human moved first, stepping carefully into the crater. She followed, her eyes scanning the shadows. The ground crunched under their feet, every sound loud in the silent night. When they reached the entrance, the human pushed away some metal and revealed a narrow tunnel leading underground. He gestured for her to wait, then entered first. His light glowing against the walls, the girl stood trembling, hugging herself, listening to the echo of his steps below. Minutes passed. Then his voice came from inside. "Safe, come." She swallowed hard and stepped into the tunnel. The air was damp and cold, the walls rough with stone, but it was safer than the open ruins above. She walked deeper, following the light. until the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Her eyes widened. Inside the chamber were people, not just one or two, but many. Survivors from different species. Some sat weakly on the ground, some worked to repair machines. All turned their eyes toward her and the human. The girl froze, the air thick with silence. The survivors whispered among themselves. Some looked at the human with distrust, some with fear, others with anger. One voice rose, sharp and bitter. Human here?" Another shouted. "Get him out before he kills us all." The girl's body shook. She stepped back, but the human stood still, his eyes calm. He did not raise his weapon. He simply waited, letting the voices echo. The girl looked at the survivors, then at him. Her heart thumped. She remembered the food, the medicine, the protection. She remembered his hand pulling her back from death. Her voice came out weak but clear. "No, he saved me." The chamber went quiet for a moment. Dozens of eyes stared at her, her small body trembling, yet her words strong. "Without him, I would be dead." The silence stretched. Then a few of the survivors lowered their weapons, their eyes filled with doubt but also with questions. The girl stood close to the human, her fear still strong but her choice clear. She had followed him this far and she would not step away now. The journey was not finished, but it had brought them here, to a place where trust could break, or hope could begin. And in that chamber, with strangers and shadows watching, the next part of her fate was waiting to unfold. The chamber was dim, lit by weak lamps made from scraps of old machines. The air was heavy with dust and the smell of metal. Survivors sat in groups, their faces pale and tired. Their eyes followed the human and the girl. Sharp with suspicion, the girl stood close to the human. Her body trembled under their stares. She had spoken in his defense, but now she felt small. Her words still echoed. "Without him, I would be dead." One alien, tall with scarred skin, stepped forward, his voice rough. "Humans do not save, they kill." Murmurs of agreement rose through the chamber. Fear and anger spread like fire. The human did not speak. He stood calm, his weapon at his side but not raised. His eyes swept across the room, measuring each face. His silence was heavier than words. The girl looked at him, then back at the others. Her voice cracked, but she forced it out. "He gave me food, he gave me medicine, he fought the scavengers for me. Why would he do this if he wished me dead?" Some survivors lowered their eyes, doubt moved among them. The tall alien sneered. "Maybe he keeps you alive for a reason. Maybe he will use you." The girl's heart pounded. She wanted to argue more, but her throat felt dry. Then another survivor, an older woman with gray scales, spoke from the corner, her voice slow and weary. "We judge quickly, but we know nothing of him yet." The chamber grew quiet. The human finally spoke, his words short. "I seek no war here. I seek safety." His voice carried strength, not anger. For a moment, the whispers stopped. The survivors looked at one, another confused. The old woman gestured to a small space near the fire. "Then sit, stranger, but know this. If you bring danger, you will not leave alive." The human gave a short nod and sat. The girl sat beside him, still nervous, but a little calmer. As the night stretched on, the survivors spoke in low voices. Some fixed broken devices, some shared small rations. The girl listened and learned. They had been hiding here since the Great Attack. They feared soldiers would return. They feared everyone. She noticed something. The survivors had weapons, but they were weak and broken. Their tools were rusted, their energy cells nearly empty. They were surviving, but barely. Hope was thin here. The human reached into his bag and pulled out a small device. He worked silently, repairing a broken power cell with quick skill. Sparks flew, and then the cell glowed faintly. A soft hum filled the chamber. The survivors gasped. Their eyes widened. Some whispered, "He knows machines." Others muttered, "Maybe this is a trick." But when the old lamps glowed brighter from the new power, even the loudest doubters fell silent. The chamber no longer felt like a tomb, but a place where life returned. The girl watched him. Her chest warmed with something she had not felt in a long time. Pride. She felt proud to stand beside him still. Not all were convinced. Later that night, when most survivors rested, the tall, scarred alien whispered with others, his voice sharp. "We cannot trust him. Humans destroy. That is all they do." The girl heard. Her heart sank. She wanted to shout, but fear closed her lips. She knew trust was fragile here, and one wrong word could break it. The human noticed too, but he did not rise to argue. He only kept working, fixing tools, repairing weapons, turning scraps into something useful. His actions spoke louder than words. The next day, danger came again. The underground shelter shook with a distant roar. Dust fell from the ceiling. Survivors rushed to the entrance, fear in their eyes. A young boy shouted, "They are back, enemy. Ships." The word spread like fire. Enemy soldiers were landing near the ruins above. Panic filled the chamber. Some screamed. Some tried to gather their things. Others looked to the old woman, but she was silent, her eyes empty of answers. The human stood, his face hard. He checked his weapon and looked around. "If you scatter, you will die. If you stay here with no defense, you will die, but if we fight together, we have a chance." His words cut through the chaos. The survivors froze. His voice was not loud, but it was steady, full of certainty. The tall alien snarled, "Fight with a human, never." But others hesitated. Their eyes turned to the glowing lamps, to the working tools, to the girl. The girl stepped forward, her small voice rose. "He saved me. He saved us with light. He is not our enemy." Silence followed. Dozens of eyes on her. Her body shook, but her will was strong. "If you cannot trust him, then trust me." The old woman spoke again, her voice slow. "The child is right. Trust is dangerous, but fear is worse. If he wishes to fight for us, let him." The survivors murmured, some still angry, some doubtful, but many nodded. They had no leader, no plan, and now a human offered both. The human did not smile. He only gave a single nod. "Then prepare. They will come soon." The chamber turned alive. Survivors gathered weapons. The human taught them quickly, showing how to repair, how to aim, how to hide. The girl followed his every move, learning, watching, growing. She remembered the ruins where she had almost died, the moment when she had nothing. Now she stood with others, with a human at her side, and for the first time, she felt the weight of hope pressing stronger than fear. But above them, in the ash-filled sky, enemy ships landed. Their engines roared like thunder. Their shadows fell over the broken city, and the war was not finished yet. The shelter had given her safety, but it had also given her a new truth. This human was not a monster. He was a fighter, a builder, a protector. And soon, the galaxy would see. The shelter was no longer silent. It was alive with movement. Survivors hurried through the chamber, carrying broken weapons, dragging pieces of scrap, their voices rising with both fear and urgency. The human stood in the center, his armor scratched but his posture strong. His eyes scanned the survivors, measuring their fear. He raised his voice, not loud, but steady. "If you wish to live, then listen. If you wish to fight, then learn." At first the survivors only stared. Some still doubted, some still hated. But the old woman with gray scales nodded. "Do as he says." Her voice carried weight, and slowly the crowd obeyed. The human began to work. He gathered broken rifles and shattered pistols. He pulled out his tools, fixing them piece by piece. He showed others how to strip a weapon, how to clean it, how to recharge weak power cells. Sparks flew, but life returned to dead machines. The girl watched every move, her eyes wide. She had never seen someone turn ruins into strength. Each time a weapon hummed back to life, the survivors gasped, as if hope itself was reborn. But weapons alone were not enough. The human walked the chamber, pointing to weak spots in the walls. "Reinforce here," he said. Survivors dragged heavy plates to block the gaps. He marked choke points, setting traps with wires and broken metal. The girl followed him, carrying tools, small but eager. He guided her hand when she placed the wires. He corrected her when she fixed a plate wrong. His teaching was firm but never cruel. Soon the chamber began to change. It no longer looked like a hiding hole. It looked like a fortress, weak but determined. The survivors still whispered. Some said, "He is dangerous." Others said, "He saved us already." But all of them worked, because his presence pulled them into action. That night, as the fire flickered, the human gathered them. He stood tall, his shadow stretching across the wall. "You are not soldiers," he said, "but you can fight, you can defend, you can survive." He began to train them, his movements sharp and controlled. He showed them how to aim, how to stay low, how to move as one. His words were simple, but his tone gave courage. The girl trained too, her arms weak at first, her hands shaking with the weight of a weapon. But the human corrected her stance, steadying her grip. "Again," he said. And she tried again. Her shots were clumsy, but each one grew closer. The survivors began to see her not as a child, but as someone rising. They saw the human by her side, patient, relentless. Days passed quickly. The sound of drills filled the shelter, weapons fired into broken walls for practice. Survivors shouted commands. Their fear began to change into something stronger. But above ground, the danger grew closer. Enemy patrols walked the ruins. Enemy ships scanned the skies. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time. One evening, the human stood at the entrance of the tunnel, staring into the ash-filled horizon. The girl walked beside him, her voice soft. "Why do you help us? You could have left me. You could leave now." The human's face stayed still, his eyes hard. He answered simply, "Because kindness matters. Because life matters." The girl's chest tightened. She remembered her first night, hiding in the rubble, believing death had already chosen her. Now she stood here, stronger, braver, because of him. She whispered, "My people said humans are monsters." The human turned his head slightly, his voice steady. Then they were wrong. The words sank deep into her. She felt them burn in her heart. The next day, alarms rang inside the shelter. A boy rushed in, breathless. "They are coming!" Shadows filled the sky above, enemy dropships landing in the ruins, engines roaring like thunder. The survivors froze. Fear surged back, but the human raised his hand. "Hold steady." His voice cut through the panic. "We are ready." The survivors gripped their weapons, their eyes still wide with fear, but their hands firm. The girl stood among them, her weapon heavy but steady, her heart racing, but her will strong. The human checked the traps, the reinforced walls, the hidden tunnels. His plan was simple: delay the enemy, protect the weak, fight until escape was possible. The chamber shook with another explosion above. Dust fell. The sound of boots echoed in the tunnels. The enemy was coming. The girl's breath caught. She remembered the night she had been left with nothing, and she remembered the hand that gave her food. She lifted her weapon and whispered, "We are ready." The human looked at her, his eyes sharp but proud. He gave a single nod. "Then hold the line." The survivors tightened their ranks, the chamber alive with courage and fear mixing into one. They were no longer just broken refugees hiding in the dark. They were something more, because one human had given them tools, had given them strength. But most of all, he had given them hope, and hope was a weapon stronger than fear. The ground shook as the enemy dropships landed above the ruins. The ceiling of the shelter rumbled with dust and falling stone. Survivors clutched their weapons, their eyes wide with fear. The girl stood among them, her hands shaking but her grip strong. The human walked to the front of the chamber, his armor scratched, his weapon ready. His eyes were sharp, steady, unshaken. He raised his voice. "This is our line. This is where we fight, hold, and you live, break, and you die." His words cut through the noise. Silence filled the chamber. Fear was still there, but now it burned alongside courage. The survivors looked to him, their unspoken leader. Then the tunnel shook again. Heavy boots echoed. The enemy was coming closer. Armored soldiers, merciless and armed with deadly firepower, their shadows flickered against the walls. The human lifted his hand, signaling for silence. He crouched low, checking the trap set at the choke point. Wires glowed faintly, ready to spark. Broken explosives hidden under rubble waited like silent wolves. The girl knelt beside him, her breath fast. "Will we survive?" she whispered. The human glanced at her, his voice calm. "If you fight, yes. If you give up, no." Before she could answer, the first enemy appeared in the tunnel, armored and strong. A red light from its visor cut through the dark. The human gave the signal. A hidden mine exploded, shaking the ground. The enemy was thrown back in fire and smoke. The chamber roared with shouts. Survivors raised their weapons. The battle had begun. Blasts of energy filled the tunnel, red light against blue sparks. The survivors fired wildly at first, their hands clumsy. But the human shouted, "Aim low! Breathe! Fire in rhythm." They listened. Slowly their fire grew sharper. Shots hit armor. Enemies fell. The tunnel filled with smoke, with screams, with fire. The girl fired too. Her first shots missed, her hands trembling. But then she remembered his training. She steadied her grip, took a breath and pulled the trigger. The shot hit. An enemy dropped. Her chest burned with both fear and pride. The enemy pushed harder. More soldiers flooding the tunnel, their weapons cutting through stone. The shelter shook again, but the survivors held the line, guided by the human's voice. "Left wall, cover fire," he ordered. Survivors obeyed. "Hold the choke," he shouted. They listened. Their fear bent into strength under his command. Hours felt like minutes. The battle dragged on. The shelter echoed with chaos. The girl's ears rang, her body hurt, but she kept fighting. Each time she wanted to stop, she looked at the human. His figure unmoved, his weapon steady, like an unbreakable wall. Then the enemy unleashed heavier machines. Drones floated into the tunnel, firing blasts that cracked the walls. Panic spread. Survivors screamed. Some started to fall back. The human acted fast. He charged forward, rolling behind rubble. He fired precise shots. Each drone exploded in sparks, but then one blast struck near him, throwing him to the ground. The girl gasped. Her heart stopped. She ran to him, crouching low. "Are you hurt?" she cried. His face was burned, his armor dented, but his eyes still burned with fire. "Stay back," he growled, pulling himself to his feet. More enemies pushed forward. The survivors faltered. The human's voice rose again. "Stand your ground, do not break." The girl shouted too, her voice high but strong. "Fight. Fight for life." Her words carried. Survivors rallied. Their fire lit the tunnel again. The battle grew worse. The shelter's walls cracked. The ceiling dripped dust. If the fight continued too long, the whole place would collapse, the human knew. His eyes scanned the battlefield. Then he made a choice, a heavy one. He looked at the girl. "You must lead them out. Take the survivors through the back tunnel. I will hold the line." Her eyes widened. "No, you cannot stay." Tears filled her voice. The human shook his head. "If I leave, they all die. If I stay, you live." The words stabbed her heart. Her body shook. She wanted to refuse. But in his eyes she saw the truth. This was his choice, his sacrifice. He pushed her shoulder, firm but gentle. "Go. Lead them." His voice softened. "You are stronger than you think." The girl's tears burned her cheeks, but she nodded. She turned and shouted to the others, "Follow me this way." The survivors hesitated. Some looked at the human, but he waved them on, his weapon raised, his figure already stepping back toward the tunnel fire. The girl led the group through the hidden tunnel, her heart heavy, each step echoed with pain. Behind her, she heard the battle rage on. She heard his weapon firing, his voice commanding. Then came the sound of a great explosion. The ground shook. Dust filled the air. The tunnel behind them roared. With collapsing stone, the survivors stumbled forward, coughing, crying, but alive. The girl turned back once. Tears filled her eyes. The tunnel was sealed. The human was gone. Her chest broke, but her legs kept moving. She had to lead now. She had to carry his gift. The survivors reached the surface far from the crater, the sky still filled with ash, enemy ships still roared, but they were alive, they were free. The girl stood tall, her small hands clutching her weapon, her body weak but her spirit burning. She whispered to herself, "He stayed so we could live." Around her, the survivors looked at her with new eyes. Not as a child, but as their leader. They had lost much, but they carried something greater. They carried the hope one human had given them. And though the battle was not finished, though the war still raged, they knew this truth. Humans were not monsters. Humans could be saviors, and his sacrifice would never be forgotten. The survivors stumbled into the open air. The ruins stretched around them, silent and broken. The sky was filled with black smoke, glowing with fire from enemy ships above. But they were alive. They had escaped. The girl stood at the front of the group, her chest heavy with grief. Behind her, the sealed tunnel lay under rubble, and beyond it, the human still fought. His sacrifice echoed in her heart, louder than the engines of the ships. The survivors gathered close. Some wept, some shook with fear. Others simply stared at her, waiting. They had no one else. Their eyes begged for direction, and to her shock, they looked not to the strongest alien warrior among them, but to her. She felt small, weak. Her hands trembled as she gripped the weapon, but then she remembered his voice, steady and calm. "You are stronger than you think." The words burned inside. Her giving her strength, she lifted her chin. Her voice cracked at first, but grew steady. "We cannot stop, we cannot fall. He gave his life for us. If we give up now, his sacrifice is wasted." The survivors listened, their eyes filled with sorrow but also with fire. They nodded slowly. They were ready to follow her. They moved through the ruins, step by step, hiding from patrols, climbing over broken towers. The girl led them with new courage, repeating the lessons he had taught. Stay low, move together, never leave anyone behind. Every choice she made, every path she picked, felt guided by him. His presence was gone, but his spirit walked with her. Days passed. The group grew weaker from hunger, but they also grew closer. They shared food, they helped each other walk, and they remembered the human. The story of his defense spread among them, whispered at night like prayer. One survivor said, "He fought. Like 10 men," another said. "He gave us hope." And the girl said, "He gave me life." When they reached the edge of the ruined city, they found another camp of refugees, dozens of survivors hiding in fear. When they saw the girl's group arrive, they expected only more sorrow, but instead, they heard a new story. The girl stood, tall before them, her voice steady. "A human saved us." The words shocked the crowd. Murmurs of disbelief rose, but she did not falter. She told them everything: the food, the medicine, the battles, the sacrifice. The other camp listened, their faces full of doubt. They had heard only tales of humans as destroyers, cruel and merciless. But her story cut. Through those lies like light in the dark, her words carried truth simple and strong. He was not a monster. He was a protector. When I had nothing, he gave me kindness, and that kindness saved us all. The camp fell silent, and then slowly, others nodded. The story spread. First through the camp, then beyond. Like fire catching dry grass, it spread. From survivor to survivor, soon across the ruins, whispers carried the tale. A human fought for us. A human saved us. The girl felt the weight of this story grow. It was not only hers now. It belonged to all of them. It was hope, a weapon stronger than fear. Weeks later, the survivors found safety in a hidden valley. The enemy patrols were far. The land was harsh, but it was theirs. The girl helped organize food gathering, repairs, defenses. Her small figure moved with purpose. Her voice carried strength. Each night she stood by the fire, telling the story. Again, not as a tale of war, but as a tale of kindness. He did not have to help me, but he did. He did not have to save us, but he did. His kindness changed my fate, and now it changes yours. The survivors began to see her as a leader, not because she was the strongest, not because she was the oldest, but because she carried his spirit. She grew, not in body, but in courage, and with her growth, the truth about humans grew too. No longer whispers of fear, but whispers of respect, whispers of hope. Months later, when other survivor groups joined them, she stood before hundreds, her voice steady. The galaxy calls humans monsters, but I tell you the truth. A human saved me. A human saved us. Remember his sacrifice. Remember his kindness. Her words shook them. They began to question the old lies. They began to wonder if humans were not enemies, but something more. The girl raised her hand to the stars, her eyes wet with tears but burning with fire. One act of kindness can change the fate of worlds, she said, and the crowd echoed her words. That night, as the stars burned above the broken sky, she sat alone, her heart still heavy with loss. But she smiled faintly, because she knew he had not died for nothing. His kindness had become more than a memory. It had become a seed, planted in the ashes of war. A seed that would grow, a seed that would spread. The galaxy would one day know the truth, that humans were not only feared, they could also be loved, and it began with her, a girl once left with nothing, now carrying everything he had given her, the story of a single human's kindness, the story that would change her people, the story that would change the stars,